At my husband's funeral, as I sat with tears in my eyes, my daughter leaned over and whispered, "Hurry it up. I have a meeting." My heart broke. But when I walked to the podium and pulled out an envelope, I said, this was his last letter. As I read it, she covered her face in shame. She regretted every word she had said. Before I tell you the full story, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Linda Harris, and I was married to Robert for 40 years. He was my partner, my best friend, and the father of our 2 children. When he passed away, it felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. The weeks leading up to his funeral were some of the hardest of my life. Robert had been sick for a while, but he faced his illness with quiet dignity. Even when his strength was fading, he never let go of his sense of humor or his love for family. Every evening, I sat by his side, holding his hand, listening to his stories, and cherishing every word. One night, he handed me an envelope. "Linda," he said softly, "when the time comes, I want this to be read. Promise me you'll share it." I promised, not knowing just how much power those words would hold. Our daughter, Jessica, is 38. She has always been ambitious, chasing success in her career. She loves her family, I know she does, but she struggles to slow down, to truly be present. In the months when Robert needed her most, she only came by a few times, each visit short and rushed. She would say things like, "I'll come back next week, Dad. I've got deadlines." I told myself she was busy, but deep down, I wished she had shown him more of her time. Our son, Daniel, is 35, the opposite of his sister. Quiet, thoughtful, and dependable, he visited often. He didn't say much, but his presence was steady. He carried groceries, fixed little things around the house, and sat silently with his father, letting his company speak louder than words. Jessica's daughter, Lily, is only 10, and she adored her grandfather. She would sit by his bed and read him her school books, or bring him drawings she made just for him. He would smile, even on the hardest days, when she held his hand and whispered, "I love you, Grandpa." For Robert, those moments with Lily were the brightest part of his last months. When the day of the funeral arrived, I felt like I was moving through fog. The church was filled with flowers, the scent of roses and lilies wrapping around me as I tried to keep myself steady. Family, friends, and neighbors gathered, their faces somber. Daniel sat close to me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. Lily clutched a small bouquet of daisies, her eyes wide and teary. Jessica, however, walked in late. She sat beside me, her phone still in her hand, glancing at it as if she couldn't disconnect. I told myself not to judge her, that people grieve in different ways. But in my heart, I longed for her to put everything aside, just for one day, to honor her father. As the service began, memories of Robert filled the room. Stories of his kindness, his hard work, his love for his family. My chest ached with every word, my tears falling faster as I realized just how much I would miss him. And that's when Jessica leaned over, her voice sharp against the quiet. "Hurry it up. I have a meeting." In that moment, the pain of losing my husband doubled. Not only was I grieving him, but I was grieving the respect and compassion I thought my daughter would show. I gripped the envelope in my purse, the one Robert had given me, and I knew what I had to do. The sound of Jessica's whisper, sharp, cold, and impatient, kept echoing in my head. "Hurry it up. I have a meeting." Those words cut deeper than any wound I had felt in a long time. I sat frozen in the pew, my hands trembling, trying to steady myself while people around us bowed their heads in quiet reflection. The funeral service continued, but my daughter's lack of compassion drowned out the comfort of the prayers and the hymns. I tried to remind myself that grief looks different for everyone. Maybe Jessica was hiding her pain behind her career and her busy schedule. But even if that were true, saying those words at her father's funeral felt like a slap in the face, not only to me, but to the memory of the man we were honoring. I glanced at Daniel. He had heard her. His jaw tightened, and he looked at me with a mixture of anger and sadness. But he didn't speak. He simply squeezed my hand, his way of saying, "I'm here." Lily sat quietly, clutching her daisies tighter. Too young to understand the tension but old enough to sense it. Inside, I was torn. Part of me wanted to turn to Jessica and tell her how deeply she had hurt me, to remind her that this was her father's final goodbye. But another part of me felt too weak to to confront her in that moment. I had already lost so much. I didn't know if I had the strength to lose the image of the daughter I still hoped she could be. That's when my mind went to the envelope in my purse. Robert's last letter. He had given it to me during one of his final nights at home. His hand had been shaky, his voice faint, but his eyes were steady as he said, "Linda, when the time comes, read this. Don't keep it hidden. They need to hear it." At the time, I thought it was simply a love note to the family, words of comfort to carry us through our grief. But now, sitting there with Jessica's impatience ringing in my ears, I realized Robert had known something I hadn't. He had known that his words would be needed, not just to heal, but to correct. My heart pounded as I debated with myself. Should I really read it aloud? Would it embarrass Jessica in front of everyone? Would it feel like I was attacking her in public? But then I thought of Robert, how hard he had worked, how much love he had given, how he deserved to be remembered with respect. If his own daughter couldn't put her meeting aside for an hour to honor him, then maybe it was time for her to hear his voice again, even if it came from the page of a letter. The pastor called for family members to share their memories. Daniel looked at me, silently asking if I wanted to go up. I hesitated, my hands gripping the edges of the pew so tightly my knuckles turned white. Then I reached for my purse. The envelope was still there, its edges slightly bent from being carried around for weeks. I held it close, and I could almost hear Robert's voice in my head. "Be strong, Linda. They need this." As I stood, I could feel Jessica's eyes on me. She leaned closer, her voice low and irritated. "Really, Mom? Just keep it short, okay?" Her words only strengthened my resolve. I walked slowly to the podium, each step heavy with both grief and determination. The room was quiet now, the kind of silence that carries weight. Friends, family, neighbors, all of them watched as I placed the envelope on the wooden stand and looked out over the crowd. For a moment, I just breathed. My eyes swept across the faces, landing on Daniel's steady gaze, Lily's innocent curiosity, and finally Jessica's impatient frown. I felt tears gather in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I straightened my back and said, "Before Robert passed, he gave me something. He asked me to share it today. These are his last words." A ripple of anticipation moved through the room. People shifted forward in their seats, waiting. Even Jessica's face changed, her expression caught between curiosity and unease. I lifted the envelope, carefully opening the flap. The paper inside was worn, Robert's handwriting faint but steady. My hands shook as I unfolded it, but my voice, though quiet, was clear. "This is what Robert wanted us to hear." At that moment, I knew there was no turning back. What I was about to read would not only honor my husband, but also hold up a mirror to my daughter. And whether she liked it or not, she was about to see herself through the eyes of the father she had been too busy to cherish. Standing at the podium, I felt the weight of every eye in the room on me. My hands trembled as I held Robert's letter, but I steadied myself by remembering his voice, his calm strength, even in his weakest days. He had trusted me to deliver these words, and I knew I could not let him down. The envelope was more than paper. It was his final gift, his last chance to reach the hearts of those he loved. The church was silent, only the faint creak of the wooden pews as people shifted to listen. I could see Daniel's face in the crowd, his expression soft and encouraging. Lily sat clutching her flowers, her small frame leaning forward as if she sensed something important was about to happen. And then there was Jessica, sitting stiffly with her arms crossed, her impatience written across her face. She had no idea what was coming, and for a brief moment, I almost felt pity for her. Almost. I took a deep breath and spoke. "Robert asked me to share his words today. This is the letter he wrote before he passed." My voice cracked slightly at first, but I forced myself to go on. The paper in my hands felt fragile, but the words it held were strong enough to shake the walls around us. As I unfolded it, memories flooded back. The night he handed it to me, the way his hand lingered on mine, the soft determination in his tired eyes. "Promise me, Linda," he had whispered. "Don't let them forget what matters." That memory alone gave me the courage to open my mouth and begin. The first line caught in my throat, but once I started, the words seemed to flow. My dearest Linda, my love, and the anchor of my life, if you are reading this, then I am no longer by your side, but I am with you in every memory, every smile, and every corner of this home we built together. A soft murmur ran through the room. I saw tissues raised to eyes, heads bowing in grief and respect. My own tears threatened to blur the ink, but I kept reading. I wasn't just speaking for myself, I was speaking for Robert. Then the letter shifted. To my son, Daniel, thank you for being steady and present. I know your heart is quieter, but your actions spoke louder than any words. Keep being that kind of man. Look after your mother when I no longer can. Daniel lowered his head, his shoulders shaking as tears fell freely. I swallowed hard, moving to the next part. To my granddaughter Lily, you have been my sunshine. Your drawings and your laughter brought me more joy than you will ever know. I want you to grow up remembering that kindness is the strongest force in the world. Carry it always, even when life gets hard. Lily sniffled and clutched her daisies tighter, her innocent face glowing with both sadness and pride. And then, my voice tightened as I reached the part I knew would sting the most. To my daughter, Jessica, I know your life is busy. I know your career is demanding, and the world pulls you in many directions. But please, never forget that time with family is the one meeting you can never reschedule. Success will come and go, but family is forever. The silence after those words was heavy. I lifted my eyes and saw Jessica stiffen, her face turning pale. She lowered her gaze to the floor, her lips pressing tightly together. I could see the flush creeping up her neck, the realization dawning that her father's words mirrored exactly what she had dismissed only moments earlier. The letter wasn't written to punish her. It was written as a gentle reminder. But in the context of her behavior, it landed like a mirror, reflecting her worst self. I steadied my voice to finish. To all of you, love one another. Forgive quickly. Hold on tightly. Life is too short to waste on things that don't matter. If I am remembered for anything, let it be for the love I gave and the family I cherished. When I folded the letter and placed it back on the podium, the room was silent. Some guests wept openly. Daniel was wiping his face. Lily leaned into his side, and even the pastor had bowed his head. But it was Jessica's reaction that pierced me most. She pressed her hands against her face, her shoulders hunched, as though she could hide from everyone. Hide from the truth her father had left for her. In that moment, I knew my choice had been right. Robert's words had cut through her armor in a way mine never could. He had spoken from love, and love was the only thing strong enough to reach her heart. The church was so quiet after I finished reading that I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. I placed the letter back on the podium, my hands shaking, but I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Robert's words had been spoken, and I knew they carried more weight than anything I could have said on my own. I lifted my head and glanced out over the crowd. People were openly crying. A few held hands. Others nodded gently as if to say, "Yes, this is what matters." The letter had not only spoken to our family, but to every person who had gathered there. It was a reminder of life's priorities, of love and time and family. The very things that Robert had always valued most. Daniel wiped his eyes, his chest rising and falling as he took in a shaky breath. He gave me a small nod, one that said without words, "Thank you, Mom." Dad's message was heard. Lily leaned into him, resting her head on his arm, her daisies pressed to her chest. She looked so small, but her eyes shone with understanding far beyond her years. But it was Jessica's reaction that drew every gaze. She had her hands pressed over her face, her shoulders hunched forward. At first, I thought she was trying to hide her tears, but then a soft sob escaped her lips, followed by another. Her body shook as she tried to keep herself composed, but it was no use. The words her father had left behind, gentle but firm, had pierced through the walls she had built around herself. For a moment, I felt a pang of sorrow for her. She wasn't a cruel person at her core. She was a daughter who had gotten lost in the noise of her own ambitions, forgetting the value of slowing down. She had let her career blind her to the fleeting time she had left with her father. And now, sitting in that church, she was realizing it all at once, and the regret was crushing her. She lowered her hands from her face, revealing streaks of mascara running down her cheeks. Her eyes met mine across the room, and in them, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. She looked down again, ashamed, and shook her head. The pastor stood quietly, giving her space, letting the silence sit in the air like a heavy blanket. Finally, Jessica whispered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear, "I should have been there. I should have spent more time with him." Her words broke something in me. For so long, I had been angry at her distance, her coldness, her rush to prioritize everything but family. But in that moment, I realized that her regret was punishment enough. No lecture I could give her would compare to the guilt she now carried, the weight of her father's final message pressing against her heart. I stepped down from the podium and returned to the front pew. As I sat, Jessica reached out and touched my hand. Her grip was trembling, desperate, almost like a child seeking comfort. Through her tears, she whispered, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean what I said earlier. I wasn't thinking. I didn't realize." Her voice cracked before she could finish. I looked at her, my own tears still wet on my— "Jessica," I said soft, "your father's words weren't meant to shame you. They were meant to he wanted you to understand what he always believed, that family comes first. It's not too late to honor." Her sobs grew harder, and she lowered her head onto my shoulder like she had when she was a little girl. For the first time in years, I felt her let go of the armor she had built around herself. She wasn't the confident, busy woman who barked about meetings and deadlines. She was my daughter, hurting, regretful, and needing forgiveness. Daniel wrapped an arm around both of us, pulling us close in a rare embrace. Lily looked up at me, her small voice clear and pure. "Grandpa's letter made us all remember what's important, didn't it, Grandma?" I kissed the top of her head and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart, it did." The rest of the service continued, but something had changed. The letter had shifted the room. People who barely knew Robert walked out with tears in their eyes, whispering about calling their family, about not taking time for granted. And within our family, the cracks that had divided us felt smaller. The wound was still there, but Robert's words had started the healing. As we left the church, Jessica held my arm tightly, almost as if she feared letting go. She didn't speak much, but she didn't have to. Her father's final message had spoken louder than anything else could. For her, the regret was heavy, but so was the possibility of change. I knew Robert would have been proud that his words had touched not only strangers, but his own daughter, the one who needed them most. Proud that in death, he had given us something we could carry into life. The days after the funeral carried a different weight. Grief was still there, heavy and constant, but it was mixed with something else, a quiet sense of peace. Robert's letter had not only reminded us of who he was, but also planted a seed of healing where hurt had grown. For me, it was a reminder that his voice would never truly leave me. For Jessica, it became a mirror she could not look away from. In the first few days, Jessica stayed quiet. She didn't rush off to meetings, didn't bury herself in phone calls, and didn't try to distract herself with excuses. Instead, she lingered in the house with me and Daniel. She sat at the kitchen table longer than usual, sipping coffee in silence, her mind clearly turning over her father's words. Every once in a while, she would look at the envelope, which I had placed on the mantel, and her eyes would soften. I could see the regret in her face, but I also saw something else beginning to grow, an understanding that she had lost precious time, and she could not afford to waste what remained. One evening, she broke the silence. "Mom," she said quietly, her hands twisting the edge of a napkin, "I don't know if you can forgive me. I should have been there more. I should have listened to Dad when he asked me to slow down." Her voice cracked, and she shook her head. "I can't get that time back." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Jessica, your father didn't write that letter to make you carry guilt for the rest of your life. He wrote it to give you a chance to do better, to remember what matters before it's too late. You can't go back, but you can choose differently now." Her tears fell freely, but there was relief in them. For the first time in years, she wasn't hiding behind her career or her pride. She was just my daughter again, vulnerable and real. That moment didn't erase the pain, but it opened the door for something we both needed: forgiveness. Daniel became even more protective in the weeks that followed. He visited me often, not because he felt obligated, but because he wanted to. He mowed the lawn, helped me sort through Robert's belongings, and made sure I never felt alone. I could see Robert's steadiness in him, and every time he hugged me before leaving, I whispered, "Your father would be proud of you." He would smile, his eyes wet, and reply, "I just want to be the kind of man he was." And then there was Lily, whose innocence cut through the grief like sunlight breaking through clouds. One afternoon, she brought me a drawing of our family standing under a big tree. She had drawn her grandfather with a big smile, holding hands with me, while Jessica and Daniel stood on either side. In bright letters, she had written, "Family forever." I hugged her tightly, and she whispered, "Grandpa's still with us, Grandma. He's in our hearts." Those words reminded me that Robert's legacy was safe in her little hands. As time passed, Jessica began to change in small but meaningful ways. She started leaving her phone in her purse when she visited. She joined us for Sunday dinners without checking the time or making excuses. She even began sharing stories about her father at work, telling colleagues about his values and how his letter had changed her. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was real. Slowly, she was learning the lesson Robert had hoped she would carry, that success means little if you lose the people you love along the way. For me, the aftermath was both painful and healing. I still missed Robert every day, and I always will. But I carry peace knowing that his final words touched the people who needed them most. His letter gave me the strength to stand up at that funeral and speak when I thought I had no voice left. It gave Jessica the chance to face herself honestly, and it gave Daniel and Lily a reminder to hold tight to the love that binds us. Looking back now, I realize that the greatest gift Robert left us wasn't just his love, it was the wisdom he put into that envelope. His words were not only for one moment in a church, but for the rest of our lives. They were a reminder that time is precious, family is irreplaceable, and respect should never be postponed. To anyone listening to this story, I want to share the same reminder. Don't wait until it's too late to show your love. Don't assume there will always be more time. Tell the people who matter that they matter today. My daughter whispered words at her father's funeral that I thought I would never forgive. But because of his letter, she found her way back. And because of his letter, I found the strength to heal. Before you go, if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I'd love to hear your story too.